Hope's memory is all over the place after the accident, forgetting Lily has passed away, with Doc not having the heart to tell her otherwise, putting the topic off. But at work, Doc employs Cameron Hayek, whose father he went to med school with. Meanwhile, Mel tells her sister of the pregnancy, still unaware who the father is, whilst Ricky tells Jack of his decision to enlist. Vernon finally gives in and tells Hope about Lily. She had pancreatic cancer and they went to her funeral. A young boy, Denny, confronts the doc, claiming to be his grandson, as Jack realises it was Vince that shot him, whilst Brady is stabbed, left to bleed out. Rose's sister lied to Doc and said that she passed away. She broke up with him, discovering that she was pregnant, leaving him completely oblivious. Jack butts head with his father. Meanwhile, Bree makes sure she's there for when Brady wakes up, recovering from his attack. Doc asks Denny to stick around for a while, discovering that his son, Denny's dad, passed away last month. Calvin threatens Bree as Sam breaks the news to Mel and Jack that he and his mother are getting a divorce. Preacher joins an Aikido class, meeting the instructor, Julia. Meanwhile, Brady makes bail, celebrating. Jack's mother calls, confirming the divorce. She's in love with her art teacher. Bree tells Brady of Calvin's threat, beginning to set a trap for him. Surprising Mel, Jack takes her flying, but Brad suffers a heart attack. Jack helps land the plane as they rush Brad to hospital. He argues a little with Mel as he doesn't want the confirmation as to whether the baby is his, scared that his feelings towards it will change if it isn't. Hope keeps cancelling her doctor's appointments as Doc allows Denny to stay at the practice. Preacher takes his new friend out on a picnic date as Mel catches Denny stealing from the medicine cabinet. Jack meets Tim, Chris's brother, being given a letter Chris had written to the family before his death. Hope invites Denny to stay with them at the house as Mel struggles to, but eventually tells Doc what she saw. Ricky stumbles upon Lizzie and Denny making out as Mel tries to push Jack into seeking help for his PTSD, but he resorts to drinking. That night, whilst he's passed out drunk, Mel feels something wrong with the baby. Everything turns out fine, but Jack not being there puts him on less than thin ice. Joey turns up, announcing her engagement to an old school friend. They're getting married tomorrow. Mel disapproves, thinking her sister is afraid of being alone, who isn't, but puts her feelings aside. All charges filed against the Emerald Lumber employees are dropped, as Jack and Nick work on plans to start a glamping site. Lizzie finds prescription drugs in someone else's name amongst Denny's things, as Hope pushes herself too far, freaking out whilst driving again for the first time. Jack finally agrees to stop drinking, whilst Denny sneakily looks through the clinic financial records, taking pictures, but is caught by Doc. Doing repairs in the bar, Preacher finds a knife with blood on, calling Mike immediately. During Joey's wedding, Jack goes AWOL after finding an old picture of his deceased brother. Preacher finds him passed out in his car after drinking heavily again. Before taking him back to Mel, he recommends a therapist who served himself. Brady is introduced by the real man at the top, Melissa, with Calvin being demoted. Doc confronts his grandson over the drugs and the files. He admits he's used the funds from his dad's life insurance to pay off the clinic's mortgage, wanting it to be a surprise. Jack contacts the therapist as Preacher tells Julia about Paige. Stacy warns Mel that her mum has contacted a lawyer to attempt to take custody of her last 2 embryos, wanting to raise Mark's kids. Preacher answers his phone, surprised to hear Christopher, but Vince wakes before he can say anything. Mel and Jack make up as he proves he is trying to do better. Meanwhile, Bree and Mike track down Calvin, watching on as his boat explodes. Mel meets with Mark's mother, telling her to back off, as Mike finds Sally attempting to get her to testify, calling Jake to tell him about the knife he found. The DNA matches Vince, not Brady. Don contacts Bree, saying that her claims are hurting him. That night, Paige comes knocking at Preacher's door. She's been staying in a women's shelter. Having tracked down Sally, she was told Vince had taken Christopher to get to her. He will exchange Chris for her. Preacher tracks him down but finds his cabin empty, coming home to find Paige had taken the deal, with Christopher home safe with him. Doc insists they hire some medical aid to help Hope, but she's stubborn, eventually agreeing under her terms. Cameron states his worry over Jack, claiming he is not reliable, letting his personal feelings get in the way. Denny comes home collapsing in front of Hope and Doc, whilst Jack proposes to Mel. She says yes, also receiving the paternity test back to find out that Jack is indeed the father. Hope considers Lizzie to be her aide, but she doesn't want things to be awkward around Denny. After the day's events, Cameron gives his notice. Meanwhile, Mike tells Brady Deputy Howard was helping Calvin launder money, admitting to planting the gun in the truck, with Brady's charges being dropped. Lydia and the town say goodbye to Ricky as he leaves for the station. Preach calls Mike, having tracked Paige and Vince down. Not wanting to leave Doc alone, Mel resigns in the hope that Cameron will be forced to stay. Denny confronts Lizzie, telling her that they cannot be anything more than friends, as he has Huntington's disease, and it's terminal. Mel and Jack sit down to celebrate their engagement with Nick and Joe, being introduced to Nick's sister, Melissa Montgomery. Don finds Bree telling her to sign an NDA over their prior relationship, but she refuses. Preacher takes Vince down, rescuing Paige. Meanwhile, Mel and Jack find Charmaine collapsed in pain, struggling to breathe as she tells Jack that he's not the father after all.